light in their amber eyes, their long velvet ears, their speed. And he loved music for the way it made his heart dance inside him. He often played, strumming and plucking delicate tunes on his harp, but he never sang. For some reason, he thought he couldn't. He had always known that his family was special. While others in the village would hunt the hares with fierce, swift hounds, his grandfather would seek out orphaned leverets, raise them until they were strong, and set them free back into the wild land. You never know, he would say, which might be the one. But this wasn't why the family was special. It was because they held the secret of the golden hare, and they held it very close. Once every 50 years or so, all the hares in the land would gather together. In a clearing in the woods, the males would strive to win the heart of the golden queen of the hares, for a new queen was needed. A few people who had heard rumors of golden hares thought this was why hares boxed in the twilight, but the family knew that the hares would sing, and this was how one hare would win the queen's heart. It was the task of the boy's family to keep the old queen safe, to make sure that at the end of her days she reached the shore and crossed to the island of the golden hares. For others who had heard of the golden hare thought to catch and kill her, sure that her golden coat would bring wealth and health to whomever possessed it. And how the boy ached to hear the hares sing. No one knew when it would happen. His mother had lived her life without a whisper of hare song. Grandfather often sang strange, soft melodies when he tended the orphans. Gentle music as the tiny creatures rested, warm in the bowl of his huge hands. The boy would try to catch these melodies in the strings of his harp, weaving the tune with his clever fingers while Grandfather hummed and sang. And then one day, the hares began to move. The boy was awake early, out in the twilight, dew-dropped morning. At first one, then two, then more and more hares began to move across the land from east to west, shadows made long by low morning sunlight. He ran home, woke his sister, and they gathered together food, a blanket, a flask for water, and away they ran, hand in hand, following the hares, leaving behind 2 sleeping people and a note. "We are gone, for the hares are running." They followed, over the hills, across streams, through forests, bridging rivers, moving in the twilight darkness, fearful of hound, hawk, and huntsman. The hares knew that the 2 children followed them, and they knew who they were. But someone else followed the children, hiding, secret. He'd heard of the Queen of the Hares, and in his greed he thought he would get a very fine price for her golden fur. They came at last to an ancient wood of twisted oak, hard by the sea. In the wood, a wide clearing began to fill with brown hares and white mountain hares. And on a raised mound in the middle, on a moon-white rock, sat the most beautiful creature the boy had ever seen. Silence fell. It seemed to the children that the world stood still and listened. One by one, the hares stepped forward to sing. And oh, but they had never heard such music before. On the edge of the clearing, the boy stood with his sister and watched and listened. And he thought his heart would break with the beauty of each wild song. He listened with his ears, and he listened with his heart. And he longed to find each song in the strings of his harp, and that was when he realized he'd left it behind at home. Just when he thought that the hare song could not be more beautiful, one last hare came forward to sing. Small and ragged of ear, a vagabond runt of a creature. And yet the children recognized the hare, for this was one that their grandfather had raised. From the very first note, they knew that their hare had won the Queen's heart. As the hare's song ended, there was a texture to the silence held in every leaf of every tree in the wild wood. Then, one by one, the hares began to drift away through the gathering darkness. Moths took to the air. Only the Queen and the vagabond, the boy and his sister remained. The summer began to wear away as the boy and his sister watched over the pair. The nights brought a chill, mornings brought a frosting to the grass. The hare and his bride had a beautiful golden leveret child, bright as the first star of morning in a nest of silvered grass. She grew fast. Foxes barked in the wild wood, but the children kept watch, and the hares were safe. One morning, the old queen came to the children in the early hours. It was time for her to leave. And so they began the short journey away from the shelter of the wildwood and towards the shore. This was the time of greatest danger. A new queen in the wildwood, and the old queen, worn and tired. If she could reach the the shore and cross the wide space of the sea, she would be safe forever on the island of the Golden Hares. No man could set foot there. High on the hill, 2 hounds, one silver, one black, raised their heads to read the wind and caught the scent of gold. Sometimes she walked beside them. Sometimes the boy carried her, tucked warm in his jacket next to his heart. At first he thought it was the rhythm of the Queen's fast-beating heart that he felt rather than heard. As the sound grew louder, he thought it was his own heart, but then it was joined by another. And now he knew what it was, for he could see them, black and silver, hounds' feet pounding the earth as they came for her. Swift and young were the hounds, and the Queen was exhausted, the children full of fear. The hunter sounded his horn, and a blood note ripped the air. Now the children, brave and still, began to sing. At first only his sister, a high, wild note, free as a lark. Then the boy, joining his voice for the first time with hers, weaving and winding the hare's speed and the twilight dancing with the threaded memory of the hare's music and fear and love and beauty. They sang until their song brought the hounds to a halt and the huntsman to his knees. As the children sang, the old Queen began to swim across the sea to the distant shore. She faltered midstream, so tired it seemed she would be taken by the waves. But the children watched as a seal swam up beneath her and lifted her light across the water. In the setting sun, it seemed that the seal was golden, not grey. The distant island glowed for a while, as if the sun itself was setting there. As darkness fell, it disappeared, perhaps for another 50 years. The children fell silent. Hand in hand, they turned away from the sea and began the long walk home. 2 great hounds at their heels, one silver, one black. For a while, the soft voice of the wild seal followed them. It is said that now and again, if your heart is good, as the sun sets, you might catch sight of a golden island resting on the sea's edge. If you're really lucky, you might hear the faint trace of music, hare song mingling with the sound of the waves.